Welcome to the Happy Mindset, episode 102. Today's episode is called The Legacy Code. So today I'm joined by Armando Cruz. Armando is an author, a physical therapist, and a transformational coach. On today's episode, he talks about how he became all these things. He shares some of the understanding he has around the brain, because he works with people on a brain level as well as much as anything when it comes to physical therapy. We talk a little bit about mindset. He touches on values, how internal conflicts when it comes to our value system, how that can cause things to be more complicated than they need to be in our day-to-day lives. Armando also shares some of his stories. So he talks about a point in his life where he felt like he had the trappings of success, but he had an empty feeling inside. He felt like there was more to give, but he didn't know what. So he talks a little bit about that. That's actually what he covers in his book as well, The Legacy Code. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and thanks again for listening. Okay, so thanks for joining us today, Armando.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So my first question for you is, who are you and what are you doing in the world today?
My name is Armando. I am what I like to say, a connoisseur of experiences. I'm a husband, a father, and I essentially, what I do in this world is I help people get out of pain and live a more vibrant, more exciting life.
The first time anybody said a connoisseur of experience. I like that. Yeah, quite cool. So yeah, like you work with people as well with because we were just talking a little bit before, and you are a physiotherapist, and you're also somebody who's into the mindset and mental work as well. Can you just talk a little bit about like how you can help people mindset and physically, how they connect? How do you see them connect in your job?
Sure. I think it's important to set the context for all of this, right? People always talk about mindset, and I think that's a big part of this. But mindset assumes that you're in your human mind. So if you don't mind, let's kind of peel back a few of the layers.
Mm-hmm.
We have as humans three primary brains. Our most primitive brain is our reptilian brain. On top of that is what we call the mammalian brain. So these are the animal brains. These are the ones that we evolved from at its core. Like if you look at a reptile is born and basically mom says, see you. Like as soon as the reptiles, there's no nurturing, there's no nothing. And so the reptile right away has programmed how to survive. It needs to eat, it needs to find shelter, it needs to be safe. Well, that brain of ours, our reptilian brain, is responsible for that, making sure that nothing's going to kill us, that we are safe, that we can procreate, that we're breathing properly, that we're getting enough water, doing those kinds of things, the things that are going to keep us alive at a most basic level. Then we have the mammalian brain, which if you think about a mammal has to be nurtured. In fact, the mammal is very much dependent on mom, and it's dependent on the tribe. Very often when you look at mammals, they are tribal creatures. They have packs or groups, and humans are the same. We are designed to be in groups. Are there exceptions? Are there some people that do great by themselves? Sure. But in general, the way our brain is programmed is to be in a tribal society. Well, this brain is responsible for, again, keeping us alive in this tribal society. And so maybe you've experienced this. Somebody looks at you and now you interpret it like, move, that guy must be mad at me, or like you get like a weird feeling by this person. Well, that's the mammalian brain saying, wait, if we rewind and go back in the history of time, well, I don't survive if I don't have a tribe. And so if this guy's looking at me weird, he may be casting me out of the tribe. I may be getting kicked out. So I need to protect myself. So your body's always in this protection state. Your body is always, people always say, oh, why, some people are really negative. Well, some people's brain is hyper aware of all the things that could go wrong, because that's how the brain protects itself to stay alive. It doesn't serve you when you can't move forward, though. But again, you have the reptilian mind, which is keeping you at a core alive. Then you have the mammalian, which is responsible for tribal dynamics and hierarchy. This is the leader. This is the next person. This is where I fit in there. And then finally, we have access to the human mind, which is where we can create, which is where we can self-actualize. This is where we can be human. We can do the math. We can learn the languages, because that brain, which is much bigger, the neocortex, the new brain, is the one responsible for that. But as one of my mentors used to say, you can't meet the human until you feed the animals. And what that means is, if you're in your animal brains, you don't have access. If you've downshifted into the animal brains because you're in a state of threat, then you don't have access to your human brain at that moment. And so mindset becomes a moot point, because you can't access mindset. Mindset happens in the human mind. And so before there's mindset, we have to understand brain set, which is exactly what I just talked about, is how to feed these animals so that you can meet the human and start creating. Does that make sense?
No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, like the Dunbar's rule, isn't it too? With the mammalians, it's like the 150 people in the tribe.
Right.
So,
Right.
So how do you work with people with their brain when it comes to even physical ailments? How does the brain have an impact on physical conditions?
Consider how we experience the world. And we do it through our senses, right? Sight, sound, smell, touch. That's how we experience the world. Without our senses, we don't have an experience. So it's very important that, first and foremost, our sensory system be working properly. If it's not working properly, now it sends a signal back to the brain that says, hey, something is wrong. We're in threat. Now we'll go back to animal brains, because something is wrong in our senses. Now we may be, in our brain's perspective, we may be susceptible to being attacked. At the end of the day, that's what the brain is always thinking. Is something going to kill me? That's what it's trying to do. So if something is not working properly, it's saying, hey, are we more vulnerable to being killed at this point? And our reality that our brain creates is actually it is not necessarily the reality of what is. And perhaps you've experienced something like that, where you're like, in your mind, you've concocted this whole story of what was going to happen if you said something to someone. And you obviously think worst case scenario. And then you go and you actually talk to that person and they receive it amazing. You're like, oh, well, I was worried for no reason. I mean, has that ever happened to you, or something similar like that?
Yeah, anytime as well, when you're doing something new that you don't have enough data on, it's unknown to you. It's the worst case scenario pops to mind a lot of the time first. Right.
So you brought up the word data, and I think it's a great word to bring up, because, first of all, there are different types of people, different personality types. Some people are really data driven. Some people are very feelings driven. Those are the two main ones. And then there's hybrids of those. If you're a data driven person, you're probably also very process driven. And so if let's say, would you consider yourself a data driven person?
I think I'm kind of in between, a hybrid. I think
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say you're somewhere in between, but I would imagine that there are certain areas in your life, maybe from a health perspective, you may want to see more data than maybe, or let's just say in a financial perspective, you may want to go with something that's more data driven than feelings based. And then maybe in a relationship, you lean maybe a little bit more to the feelings than the data, because you want to make that connection in a very different way, right? So while you're in flux between them, depending on the scenario, there are people that just in general operate and look at the world through different lenses, one of them being data driven. Well, if that person that's really data driven, I come in and I say, hey, I got a surprise for you. We're going here. That in their brain is kind of like threat. They're like, wait, I don't have the data. I don't know what to bring. I don't know. Well, if I don't know what to bring, then I'm going to be in danger. Like what if I get too cold, or what if I get too hot? What if I wear something that we're going to go to a nice restaurant and I don't have something nice to wear. So now what are people going to think of me? Right? Like these are some of the things that the brain kind of dives into. So a person that's very data driven, you need to give them the information beforehand. You're like, oh, look, ideally you're going to give them a few weeks, even a month or several months would be even better because they can plan. They need to plan.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe you know somebody like that, right? That
Yeah.
if you spring something up on them, they're like surprises are not great for them. Whereas other people, they love surprises. They love surprises. You surprise them, they're like, it's the happiest thing in the world. The fact that they don't know anything that's going to happen excites them. And so it's the same experience. You're saying the same thing to each person, but one, because of the way they operate in this world, needs more data, so they're freaking out, and the other one loves it because they love the unknown and they like to be surprised.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? I'm sure you've experienced some of those people, right?
Yeah, I'm one of those people sometimes as well. Yeah. But it's good that is the type of things that goes through your mind. Like, if you're not somebody who likes spontaneity, it's those types of thought processes that go in there. And yeah, I think I'm probably more on that end actually, in terms of like something new that I haven't ever done before. Those will be the default thoughts. But then I've trained myself to do things that I find uncomfortable, like the podcast and writing books and stuff. It's like that gets me out of that way of thinking. So that's how I've become more of a hybrid, I think, over time, because I forced myself to do things I haven't been comfortable with.
And by the way, that's a great point, is the fact that you've trained yourself. So what's happening is you're bringing more prediction into it by exposing yourself to it. So now your brain says, oh, wait, I can handle this, because you've given it these micro doses of spontaneity or of unknowns. So if you're not that person, like, it's very easy, especially with social media, to look at people. And very often social media is driven by the loudest, flashiest people that if you're not that type of person, it's easy for you to think like, oh, I'll never make it because I'm not a Gary Vaynerchuk. I'm not a Grant Cardone. I'm not a Tony Robbins. I'm not whatever. Put your person in there that's one of these larger than life characters that has to be the center of attention, right? Like they are a shining star that they're not there to share the stage. They are the stage, right? But you can still be successful and not be that person. If you understand the way you operate, then you can cater both your training and the way you set up your life and the way you create your sequencing, your routines to help reinforce that and allow you to optimize your strengths, because data-driven people are very much needed the same way as spontaneity people. In fact, data-driven people create the foundation of everything so that everyone else knows that stuff is going to be predictable. Because if you leave it to somebody who loves spontaneity, one day they're doing one thing, the next day they're doing the other one, and you never know what the heck is going to happen. And so you don't want somebody who's spontaneous doing your taxes, right? Because you want to make sure they're done right. You want to make sure there's a system and they don't miss anything. Whereas very data-driven people tend to be a lot more process-driven, detail-oriented. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. So what came to mind for me is that if how would somebody go about getting to know their strengths and weaknesses, like who they are as a person? You help people with that?
Yeah, definitely. But I think just having this conversation like we're having, if you're listening to this, you have an inkling of where you fall into. And what you'll find is that you'll have defaults in different areas of your life. There are areas, let me give you a personal example, right? Because these are from me, right? I tend to, at the beginning, I said I was a connoisseur of experiences. And what I mean by that is it's important for me to put myself in scenarios that I don't always know what's going to happen. I specifically love doing that in a physical state. In other words, I love doing ultra marathons. I love being in nature. I love going camping with the bare minimum, going out into the woods and seeing how I can survive with the bare minimum. Like none of it is comfortable. In fact, sometimes there's a lot of suffering, but I do it because it makes me feel alive. It lets me know oh, wait, I know a little bit more about myself. I've grown a little bit more. It's the suffering is equivalent to like weight training. You know how you put more weights and it's more resistance. The more resistance you put and the more consistent you do it, the stronger you get. Well, these opportunities of suffering, that I like to call them, these adventures, help me create a little bit more resilience. On the flip side, when we talk about finances, I find myself, I don't take those kind of risks. I don't put myself in those because part of it is I don't understand finances to the same degree that I understand the physicality of who I am. So that unknown and how to manipulate it, I haven't quite mastered it to the same degree. Do you understand what I'm saying? So part of this
Yeah.
is that mastery of it. I feel very much in mastery when I'm dealing with my physical body and as a result, my mental state. The financial part, I don't yet know how to manipulate the financials in a way that I can get out of most situations. So I'm not willing to cross a certain line there. Whereas the line for physical stuff is way out there in comparison.
Mm. Gives you more experience, I guess, in the physical
Right.
realm. Yeah. How about the what kind of came to mind for me? The Buddhists say that like seeking out pain and moving through pain is a great way towards enlightenment. That's what kind of that's the way I
Yeah.
kind of look at it as well.
Yeah. I
But
tend to agree.
but how did you get into ultra marathons? Were you always into them, or was it later on in life? Or
I was running early on. I didn't like to run, but my father ran and did Ironman triathlons. So as I grew up watching him doing it, and then I would start training with him because that's how we spent time. We would go out for a run, we would go out for a bike ride, so there was a lot of physicality in that. I had time to grow with it, and then I ran at university, cross country and track and field. And then afterwards I kept doing it, and then it kind of intermingled with my love of nature and adventures. And I said, okay, well, what if instead of just going camping, I could run as far as I can and then camp and then kind of keep extending it so I can cover more ground and experience more of nature. So I started combining the two, and it just kind of grew from there. It kind of grew
Hmm,
from there.
that's good. And the legacy code. So that's your book that you wrote. What's that about?
Oh, that, that has an interesting backstory, that one. You mind if I share the story? If we go
Yeah,
back a bit?
yeah, definitely.
So about 7 years ago, here, let me ask this question to kind of set it up.
Hmm.
Have you ever kind of had been striving for something, and when you get there, you have this feeling of, instead of nirvana and excitement, you're like, ooh, is that all there is?
Hmm.
And then now you're like, now what? Now what do I do? I thought this was going to solve all my problems. I thought this was like the end all and be all. And now I feel like, is that all there is? Well, about 7 years ago, I kind of fell into that. Um, my wife and I had two kids. She was pregnant with our third. The business was thriving. We were helping people. At the time, it was a lot more fitness based. And um, I felt like, is that all there is? Like, I felt like it wasn't that I wanted more, like a bigger house or more cars or more anything. It wasn't I want more things. It was a feeling that I was looking for, a fulfillment that I felt like, oof, this is missing the mark. And it was made worse because I know that I had so much to be grateful for. And so who was I going to tell, oh, I don't feel fulfilled, to somebody who's probably in a worse state than I am? And now what? I'm not happy with my life, with the way it is. You have a nice car, you have healthy family and kids, you have a wonderful business that's serving people. So, oh, too bad for you. You must have a rough life. So I felt kind of trapped in this thing where my success now became my prison because I couldn't really express it to anyone else. And it made me fall into a deep depression to the point where I stopped taking business. I started pushing my family away. I would sleep like 4 to 6 hours in the middle of the day. I almost bankrupted the business. That's how bad it got. And in a point of desperation, my wife is like, look, I don't know how to help you. Like, we need to do something. We can't continue down this path. And around that time, I had a coach of mine who reached out that invited me to a retreat he was having in Thailand. And I shared it with my wife, and she asked me, do you think this can help you? Because I can't help you anymore. And I told her, yeah. I said, I think this could really help. But there were two problems with that retreat. Problem number one, like I mentioned, I almost bankrupted the business. So we didn't have the money for it. Problem number two, I said my wife was pregnant with a third child. The retreat finished about a week before the due date. And this was the third. So if anyone's ever had kids, if the more kids you have, the more likely that they can come earlier. So I had a 1 week window that if the baby came early, I could miss the birth of my third child. And I remember her at that moment and experiencing like what I call one of the greatest experiences of courage and love. She looked at me and she says, then you need to do this. You need to do this, not for you, but for all of us. She goes, I would rather you miss the birth of our child on this day than you miss the rest of our life because you're not the man, the husband, or the father that I know you can be. And that just left me breathless, right? That completely like crushed me when I heard that, because I know that I wasn't in a good place. But for her to express that in that way was really eye-opening for me. And I knew I had to do something. So we were able to figure out the finances. I went out to Thailand and I realized I gained the clarity. I was in my animal brains going over there. And by stepping away, that's kind of, in a nutshell, one of the meanings of retreat is to step away from your daily life, to step away. And just by moving away from it, you are physically putting yourself in a different perspective because you're moving away from your daily life. In my case, I was moving halfway across the world to Thailand from Miami, Florida. And that perspective and the guidance of working with my coach at that moment gave me the clarity to realize, number one, the business that we had built, there was nothing wrong with it. In fact, I was helping people the way I wanted, but there was another layer that I couldn't see before that now this experience opened up for me. And I realized that I wanted to work with other men like myself that were married men, that were entrepreneurs, that had a family-centric approach, that family first over profit first was really the thing that would drive them. And I realized that there were other men just like myself going through similar struggles, and everything that I had learned up to this point, there was an opportunity for me to share a system that I had created when I was there to approach these different areas of your life. When I returned, 3 days later, the baby was born. So I didn't miss the birth, which was great. And I started reaching out to these entrepreneurs that were married that I knew, and I started working with them in a coaching capacity and a much deeper, more intimate level for 2 years. And I realized, wait, more people need to hear this, because first of all, not everyone is ready for coaching mentally and financially. And number two, these principles can apply to anyone. And I wanted to make it available. And so the book, The Legacy Code, was a lot of the work that we were doing with these married men that are entrepreneurs to help them create a purposeful and powerful legacy. And I say create because every single one of us will have a legacy when we're done. Some people will actively choose to create it. Other people, it will be just, you kind of went with the flow, and whatever is left over at the end, that will be your legacy. And again, some people's legacy will last a long time based on the roots that you created for that legacy to thrive. Other people's will be gone in a flash, right? The world will basically, once you're gone, they'll never know that you were there again because it didn't make that much of an impact in anyone's life. So part of the whole program and the book itself is being that much more specific on the kind of legacy you want to create. And in the book, we talk about two types: a personal legacy and an impact legacy. And then walking people through how to do that in a more specific way.
One thing that was for me is how did you gain that clarity when you're in the new environment? Was it like a thought process that kind of trickled in over a while, or like do you remember how you got that clarity from that change of
Sure.
environment? And
Yes. The analogy that I can give is the peeling the layers of the onion, right? An onion has multiple layers, and if you peel one, there's the next one under, and the next one under, and the next one under, until you reveal your core. And what I found is that at our core, we operate from a certain value system that we have, certain belief system that we have. And it's up to us to, first of all, peel the layers to uncover it, gain that clarity, which is these were some of the exercises that we did while we were over there in Thailand, was peel back the layers to get understanding of what those values were, what those beliefs were, and then make a decision whether they were still serving us. And if they were, keep them. And how do you now start implementing them with the knowledge and clarity of now that you know what they are? And so the values become like a compass at that point, because now they give you that direction to know where it is that you want to go. Your beliefs are like that map. That map, in order to get directions of where you're going, you need a map and a compass to really navigate properly. You need a map and a compass. Well, your beliefs become that map, your values become that compass, and now you can start heading to your destination. And not just any way, but the way you choose, whether it can be the shortest route, the most dangerous route, the most exciting route, the most scenic route. It's up to you, because you have the map and you have the compass. Does that?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. So in your case, were you already living by the right values and beliefs? It's just you didn't have clarity on what they were.
That's correct. We all operate under values and beliefs. What I've experienced up to now with the people that I've worked with is that very few people know them explicitly. Right?
And then I'm guessing some people might have values and beliefs that don't serve them, they don't know about, and that's an issue.
Correct. And that becomes a real big issue. In fact, that becomes a big issue in executing. Very often when people have this constant procrastination, constant aversion to something, very often it's a conflict of values, or there's two main things: conflict of values, or a lack of clarity, right? Because if you walk into a dark room, you're not going to confidently just stroll across the room, because you don't want to crash into something, right? You don't want to run into a wall. You don't want to trip over furniture. But if we turn on the light, same room, but now it's lit up, you can maneuver that and confidently stroll across, right? Well, if you have lack of clarity on something that you want, something or a destination or something you want to create, you're not going to be, you're going to be hesitant. You're going to procrastinate because you can't move forward. The other day I had a client, and he had a value system that said family first, and family means everything. But with this whole coronavirus, that person also had a belief system at that moment that was in conflict, because they had some, let's call them obsessive compulsive issues with cleaning, like cleanliness. And so this coronavirus really amplified everything. And now they were really freaking out because this family had gone to public places, and now they wanted to come and stay with them. And one of them was sick. And so now they were wrestling with this value of, wait, I'm really a germaphobe. And then, but how can I say no to my family, but I can't have them here? And so there was this internal deep struggle with the belief and the value at that moment of, hey, I can't do stuff with germs, and family first, which is super important. So there was huge strife, huge struggle in this client's mindset, to the point that it was exhausting them. It started creating some pain in their body because there was this conflict inside.
Tension, I
And so,
suppose.
yeah, yeah. And part of helping them through that was peeling back the layers and getting them to understand the values that they had, first of all, the beliefs that they had, and showing them how they were in conflict, which is why they were having this internal battle, because there was a battle between values and beliefs at that moment. And then the question is okay, what is the hierarchy? Now that we've given them a name, we've made them into something you can hold, if you want to call it that. Now, how do we manipulate it? What has a hierarchy? And then what are the steps that we can take so that you can stay in alignment with each one of those? Oh, okay. Well, now he was able to communicate with his family, his kind of fears of the germs. He also helped them find a place to be able to stay in the meantime. And he also provided some ways of food and support to get that family well situated as they were going through this whole coronavirus thing, right? So once he got that clarity, he was able to take steps that aligned both of those things together.
So once you had that clarity, you could think clearly and see clearly.
Right.
Yeah, that's good. What was the process like, actually, the writing process for writing your book? Did it take you long to do it?
Another fun story on that one. This was, let's see, we are in 2020 right now. So the book came out 2018, officially January 2018. I wrote it 2017. And then 2016, December 2016, I was planning my first virtual summit. It was called the Modern Man Virtual Summit. And it was going to be March 2017. So this was December, January, February, March. So 4 months away. I decided I'm going to put this thing together. I started doing all that stuff. And halfway through the planning, I was like, I've been meaning to write this book. I got a great idea. I'll write this book and I'll give it, or I'll sell it to all the people that come to this Modern Man Virtual Summit. So in my mind, I thought I was going to write, edit, and publish in less than 4 months. I think that ignorance helped, because I don't know if I would have started. Essentially, I started writing, and the virtual summit came and went, and I was still writing. I hadn't even finished, and I kept procrastinating it. After that, after the virtual summit went, I was like, oh, I don't know. And it was June. No, end of July. It was the end of July. I was reading a book called Resisting Happiness by Matthew Kelly. On page 3 or 4, there's a line that he said that he's written, I don't know how many different books. I don't know if you're familiar with Matthew Kelly. He's great. He's a great author. But on page 4, he had written that there are people that constantly come up to him and say, "Oh, I'm writing my book and I want you to publish it," because he has a publishing company as well. And he goes, "Okay, great. Write your book and send me the manuscript when you're ready." And he wrote there, he goes, "And I never hear back from them again." And I kid you not, I put that book down. When I heard that, I said, in my mind, I am not going to be that person. I'm not going to be that person. I wasn't going to go send it to him. But in my mind, I was like, I'm on that path to be that person. I keep procrastinating and I'm not finishing this. So I put that book down. I went to my wallet and I took out $100. And I took a picture of the $100. Actually, I didn't have 100. I had 520s. So I put 520s on the table. I took a picture of it, and I made this huge post, which I have framed there in my in the on the wall there, just to remind me. And I said, guys, I need your help. This is on Facebook. I said, I've been saying I'm going to finish this book, and I keep procrastinating. And so in 10 days, here's what I said something like, in 10 days, I promise that I will send the first draft to the publisher. And everyone that comments below, I'm going to send them $100 if I don't send it to the editor in the next 10 days. I put a specific date. By the end of the day, I start getting calls from my wife, from my dad, from, are you crazy? Like, the amount of people that had commented, I was in the hole for about $9,000. Like, if I didn't follow through, I would have had to send about $9,000. In my mind, I knew that it was just kind of like the push I needed. I knew I was going to deliver. Like, I didn't feel like I was in jeopardy of not. But because even at the end, I put a PS. He goes, I put PS. I don't plan on paying any one of you because I will get this done. But in all honesty, most of the comments were like, hey, we don't want your money. We just want you to do it. Go for it. You can do it. Like, most of it was supportive. Most of it's supportive. But those are the kind of crazy things that I'll do. So that was at the end of July, early August. I sent it in the day before the due date. And then 12 drafts later of the book, I finally pre-released it the week before Christmas of 2017. 3 days later, so a week before is what, the 18th, 19th. By the 20th, 21st, it had to become a bestseller, pre-released, and then it came out January 15th of 2018. That's just the story. I didn't even tell you about obviously the writing component of it. It was a mixture of writing and dictating. So sometimes in my mind, it was easier to get it out. So I would record myself like this. I would actually get on Zoom and I would just start talking and talking and talking. And then my aunt, who's a paralegal and types fast, I would send her the videos and she would transcribe it for me, send it back, and then I would edit and manipulate it around because sometimes it was easier to get it out verbally. Other times it was easier to get it out. So it was a combination of writing and dictating and going back and forth like that.
Yeah, that's good. That makes sense. Yeah. Did you enjoy the process itself?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
I think had I known that it would have like if somebody said before I started writing, you'll probably get to it on the 12th draft, I don't think I would have done it. But the experience and the unknown of creating something new really excited me, and the process of kind of having to go through my mind and going through the thought process and organizing it, I enjoyed attaining that clarity, even though it required a lot of suffering and hard work to get there.
Yeah.
But I guess it wasn't too bad because I'm in the process of writing my second book. So I'm in the process of writing the second one. So it couldn't have been that bad.
What's the second one going to be about? Do you know?
Yes, it's on creating. I don't have a working title yet, but essentially at its core, it's the transformational power of creating micro habits even on your worst day. So it's most people try to make these big plans based off their best day. Think about like when you create goals. Most people, when they create goals, they have this big vision for these goals. And then if they even make a plan for them, it's here's a great example because it happens every year, right? Everyone tries to get in shape at the beginning of the year because they're pumped up. All right, a new year, a new me. And so what happens? They say, oh, I'm going to go to the gym 5 times a week for an hour and a half, 2 hours. Okay. In theory, if you can execute that, yeah, you'll be in great shape. But what happens 1 week, 2 weeks, a month later when life happens, and maybe you have kids and they haven't slept and they're all sick. Now you can't get to the gym. Now you're sick. You have the flu. You can't get to the gym. And before you know it, one day turns into two, two into three. And before you know it, you stopped doing everything that you said because it's too overwhelming. What if you said, for the next 30 days, I commit to doing 5 minutes of some kind of stretching or calisthenic? That's very doable. Even if you had the flu, you could stretch for 5 minutes, right? So you start creating momentum and space. So you give yourself space and access for success. And that builds and builds and builds because you can build from it. In fact, my first 100-miler, I did it not last November, the November before. So 2018. Everybody was like, wow, you did this 100-miler. What they don't know is that 4 years before, my training was all over the place. I had no consistency. And 4 years before that, I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to commit to doing 10 minutes of movement. And the way I described movement was moving my body in such a way that energizes, excites, and leaves me feeling better than before. That could be with calisthenics. That could be with stretching. That could be with running. That could be with weight training. That could be with playing a sport. But it was intentional. Like, oh, these are my 10 minutes. And so it was a minimum of that. I could do more, but at least a minimum I had to do that. Well, I did that for a year and a half without missing a day. And then I said, I've been so consistent with this. How cool would it be if I tried this with running? And so I said, let me try and do 30 days of running 30 minutes every single day for the next 30 days. And I got to 30 days. I felt good. And then I said, okay, well, we're in the middle of the week. Let me do 35 days. So it's 5 weeks. And then as I got towards the end of the 5 weeks, I said, I wonder how far I could take this. What if I added 15 minutes every 5 weeks? So after the 5 weeks, I went up to 45 minutes. And after 5 more weeks, I went up to an hour. And I went all the way up to 2 hours for 5 weeks. And then I said, I'm in phenomenal shape. Why not go and attempt something like a 100-miler? Because I've been wanting to do it. I'm in shape for it. So it took me 4 years to build up to that, which nobody really notices because they see the 100-miler, but it started with 10 minutes for a year and a half of consistency. And then that built on, let's throw in 30 minutes of running, and then 45 and an hour, and then, and it kind of built up from there. And so this idea of micro progressions that you can still execute because your body has adapted is a big shift. Is a big shift because now you grow with it, as opposed to you do too much too soon, and you don't have a way to be successful on those days when life happens.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, no, I'm a big believer in that too. It's there's not much resistance then when you tackle it day by day.
Correct. A lot less resistance.
Yeah, 'cause that's the biggest obstacle I found to change. And I think it gives your personality time to develop too. You start seeing yourself as this type of person in the long term, rather than trying to believe you're a certain person to begin with.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to doing the reps, right? Like if we talk about mastery, and if you believe whatever Malcolm Gladwell's theory of the 10,000 hours, right? I had this conversation with my 11-year-old. So my 11-year-old just completed, today was day 101, where he did a series of stuff. Running was one of it. He's been running a series, like building up. He started with 10 minutes for 5 weeks, then 15. Now he's at 20 minutes of running every day. But one of the other things that he was doing was folding origami, because he really likes origami. And I said to him, look, if you folded an hour every day for the next 30 years, you'd be 40 years old by the time you get those 10,000 hours. That means if you look at statistically how long most people live, you're halfway through your life at that point, which means you get to spend the second half of your life as an origami master, right? You spent the first 40 achieving mastery, the next 40 being a master. And he thought about it and he's like, oh, that's pretty cool. But we didn't start with an hour. All we said was, can you fold at least 10 steps of origami every single day? Well, he's been doing that for 101 days. He hasn't missed a day with the origami. But what's really fascinating is that after like 70 some days, he now started designing his own origami. He's created now his own folding patterns to create something that wasn't there before based off the repetition. He's now learned and started mastering a level of understanding of how to fold the paper to achieve certain shapes that he wants. So he created a dragon, he created a Pegasus, he's in the process of he created a phoenix, like the bird, the phoenix. He's in the process of now making it even more intricate. So what started off as something very, very minimal has now led to a new level of creativity because he's stuck with it for that amount of time.
Yeah.
And he's only 11 years old.
And he's developing that mindset and that process, seeing the values of that.
Right.
That's good. Great. No, good stuff, Armando. It was great talking to you today, hearing your story and hearing about your book as well, The Legacy Code. How would these guys find you online if they wanted to find out more about what you do?
You can go to, if you want to find out about the book, I would say go to legacycodebook.com. It's a site dedicated to it. You can read a synopsis. You can listen to interviews that I've done. I did a virtual book tour, so that's all up there. If you're a person that's been struggling with pain, go to Cruz, like my last name, CRUZ, country.com. We can help people virtually or in person to eliminate pain, chronic pain that's emotional or physical. And then finally, if you just want to follow me on social media, I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram. Each one of them has kind of like a different facade. If you'll go to Instagram, you'll see more of my adventures. I'm in the process of I decided that I wanted to make a drawing every single day of a wolf for a year. So I'm on day 54 now.
Yeah, I've seen that. It's pretty cool. Different types of wolves every day.
Yeah, on a 3x6 index card. But you'll see different projects that I do, different adventures on Instagram, and then Facebook and LinkedIn. You'll see more business and some random thoughts that I share with the internet.
Well, that's good. They're important too. Cool. Thanks, Armando. Thanks again for taking your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Cool. So until next time, have fun and enjoy the process.